And good evening. I'm Dwayne Etienne, News Director and Morning Show host at KSDM KGHS Radio. RJ Broadcasting does not support or oppose political parties or candidates for office. RJ Broadcasting has a long-standing history in our community of providing unbiased candidate and issue information that is widely used by Minnesota voters, regardless of their political beliefs. We are pleased to be partnering with the International Falls Chamber of Commerce on the forum, along with KCC TV. And sponsorship of this forum is a public service providing you with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss important issues face-to-face. The views expressed here tonight are those of the candidates and not those of RJ Broadcasting or the International Falls Chamber. Sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the station or the chamber of any particular candidate. Well, there is never enough time to cover all the issues. If you feel that a question was not addressed, please feel free to contact the candidate directly after the forum. We will start the candidates' forum with opening statements. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes for their opening statement. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order, which I did not write them down, so we will start with Rob. So Rob, you might have to turn it on. And let me add one other thing. When we get to the audience participation portion, sure. When we get to the audience participation portion, please raise your hand to ask a question and wait for a microphone to be brought to you. We had the issue on Tuesday night where nobody on the radio heard any questions from the audience. So if you could do that, please. I have a statement here very quickly, Rob, from Andrea Zapanich. Chamber members, audience members, and those watching from home, thank you for the opportunity to come and share our positions and ideas on how to make Minnesota an even better place to live. I feel awful sending my regrets, but due to a personal issue and that cannot be rescheduled, I am unable to participate in tonight's event. My humble apologies for being unable to attend, Andrea. All right, Rob.
Thank you, Dwayne. I guess you push it up to where it says mute. Anyway, so good evening, and I thank the Falls Chamber, KGHS, KSDM, KCC TV, Minnesota North College for hosting this event. I'm Rob Ecklund, and I'm married to Joan. We've been married for 38 years. We have 3 adult children. My entire life has been devoted to my family and my community, from coaching youth sports to fighting for my union brothers and sisters in the mill when I was union president, and to serving on various boards that I've served on throughout the years. I'm asking the voters to send me down to St. Paul for my 5th term. Experience matters, trustworthiness matters, authenticity matters, and seniority matters. My work record proves that I'm an effective advocate for a district, and I have become acutely aware of the needs of the many communities, townships, and other municipalities within my district. I think I've proven through the last 7+ years that I know how to connect with the voters, and I know how to bring the projects home to northern Minnesota that are effective and make our way of life better. So I ask for your vote in November. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Grant Hauschild. Thank you so much for the radio station, the chamber, and those that helped host this event. I am really, really excited to be running for this state Senate race because I think we need somebody that can step into the shoes that Tom Bach is leaving behind. I have a lot of experience despite my age. I'm 33 years old. I'm a husband and father to 2 young kids, Henry and Isla, and they're really the inspiration for why I'm running, because I want to leave Minnesota better off than we've found it. I also think that it's really important that we have an independent-minded individual in this state Senate seat. I have a long history of working in public policy in rural economic development at the Department of Agriculture. I worked in the U.S. Senate on labor policy. I have always been involved in labor advocacy and labor policy work. That's really where I come from and what I've done most of my life. And now I get the opportunity to serve as a city councilor in Hermantown. When I worked in the U.S. Senate, I worked for the number 50 most moderate U.S. Senator, Heidi Heitkamp. So I've been at that table working with Republicans and Democrats on solutions that really make a difference for people. And that's the type of senator that I want to be in the state Senate for Minnesota. I think there's a lot of nonsense in our politics. There's a lot of extremes on both sides of the aisle, and I'm not afraid to call out extremes on my side or the other side, because at the end of the day, I think we need to focus on the bread and butter issues that matter most to our communities. That means things like standing up for workers and our labor rights. It means getting rid of the tax on Social Security income. It means making sure that we're providing relief for families right now when they're dealing with rising costs. And it means making sure we get our equitable share of funding for our Northland schools. I'm looking out for the future of our state and for our region, and I think I can be a great advocate for us in St. Paul, and I hope I can earn your vote on November 8th. I look forward to talking about the issues, and thank you so much for listening.
Good evening. My name is Roger Skraba. Thank you, Falls Chamber, radio stations, and everyone, and the folks for coming out. Currently, I'm the mayor of Ely. I have pretty much served my community since high school. I was on the student council, went to college, got elected to the student senate, became a member of the finance commission in North Dakota State University. Graduated, came back to Ely, actually went to work in the real world, realized the real world wasn't ready for me, came back to Ely, and I've spent my life guiding canoe trips, running a retail store, and serving in various committees, president of snowmobile clubs, bike clubs, and then becoming mayor and city councilor. And now I'm currently St. Louis County Planning Chairperson. I bring a lot of experience to this position. I also have worked with numerous groups and organizations and helping them get their wants and needs with different funding agencies. So it's nothing new to me. I think I can help folks. I'm running as a Republican, and I told the Republican Party that please don't expect me to vote 100% with you, because I think there's a lot of good ideas on the other side of the aisle. It's just how are we going to integrate them into our agenda, and I will find a way, because I've served you folks. I don't serve the special interest. So I look forward to answering these questions, and what I really like to look forward to is getting your endorsement on or before November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. It's fortunate in some ways in that we have such a small sampling up here, because I'm fortunate enough to have questions that work at both the state and federal level. So might as well just use all the questions and just have all three of you answer the same question. So we will start in alphabetical order again, and then after the first question, I'll start mixing it up. And so we'll start with Rob, and the first question is under civic engagement. Do you support laws that require all voters to produce an official photo ID in order to vote? Why or why not?
Why don't you start off with an easy one, Dwayne? No, I don't. And the voters of Minnesota said that a few years ago when it was a constitutional question on the ballot. We have the most honest and secure elections in the country. Our Secretary of State has done a tremendous job. When we have a single ballot piece of paper for every voter, absentee, or those that show up at the polls, so we can take part in a recount when it happens, we don't need the voter ID. And I'm not going to take 3 minutes on this, because voters in Minnesota told us that. I think it was 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think, a good indication of a strong community is when citizens feel like their voices are being heard, when they're engaged. We know in Minnesota we have, if you look at the data, we're one of the highest, if not the highest, volunteer states in the country. We're obviously the highest turnout state multiple years in a row. We are a state that works, where people feel engaged and like they have a strong democracy. And that is something that we need to be very proud of as Minnesotans. I'm thrilled that, again, I get to raise my kids in a place where that civic engagement is so strong. I think to Rob's point, let's let the voters decide. Should there be voter ID or shouldn't there? when the voters decide, they said no. I think that's a pretty good indication of where things stand in Minnesota, and that's the right way to go about it.
Thank you. I think what we're talking about is today's voter ID, photo ID. I see a different way of voting in the future. In the future, the young people they're used to credit cards, and blockchain is the word I'm going to use. Blockchain voting is what's going to happen, I would say, in the next 15 years. And that means instead of getting a ballot mailed to you, having to sign everything, you will register your name, you'll get a voter ID, you will get a number, you will need your fingerprint, and when you vote, and you have 24 hours to vote, and you'll vote wherever you want, whenever you want, on that day. That day you have to vote. And if you don't have a computer and you don't have that, you can come to a polling place. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to vote. That is what the future is going to be. That's what I see. So what we did 6 years ago with a constitutional ballot may not be the same in today's world. So I like Grant, I think we should put it up to a vote with the state to see if they want to go with a photo ID, because, and as far as the voter integrity in Minnesota, I can tell you for a fact in Ely, Minnesota, when we vote and we have ties and we have to recount, they don't change. The vote machine that says what it is exactly the same vote. And that, to me, says what we're doing is we're doing it right. But again, I'm looking into the future. I think we have to start looking at how we can improve our voter, the way we vote.
Thank you. Roger, just go ahead and keep the mic. We'll start with you. This next question is under human needs. Do you support full funding for human needs programs such as Medicaid, temporary assistance for needy families, supplemental nutrition assistance programs, and the Children's Health Insurance Program? Why or why not?
Yes, 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 and yes. Whatever all of them were. I sat on the Northern Lakes, Second Harvest Northern Lakes Food Bank for 9 years. I termed out on it. I was a board member that would raise funds to get food for all of these programs and help to. We got the food for the food shelves. The food bank gets money for the food shelves. And I spent 9 years on that committee and board. And we have this big, huge surplus. And we keep wondering, what are we going to do with this $12 billion? What are we going to do with it? And when I win, my goal is to get on the Health and Human Services Committee so that I can address these needs. Because I don't know that the Republican Party has some of the compassion that I do for these issues. I know what it's like. I'm a mayor of a small town. I've seen my constituents that don't have money, that don't have, and their children. And it makes me, it disheartens me. And if I can be some way in a cog to help them, then I would. So, yes, I think we need to find the funding for this. We need to make the funding for this. The Medicare, Medicaid, and maybe it'll come up in another question, but with the ambulance service, that in itself is another whole different question. But we need to solve that problem. It's a very, very common problem in northern Minnesota and throughout this district. So, yes, I will.
Well, yes to all of them. And Roger, you sound like a Democrat. Anyway, but it's different in party philosophy on what happens when these bills get brought forward. And asking to be on HHS would be fine. Asking to have the chair's ear would be a different story. Doesn't matter what party you're in, especially if you win. You'll be a freshman, one of the bottom in seniority. I will be one of the top in seniority, and whether I'm in the majority or minority, I'll have the chairman's ear because we've formed those relationships to be able to talk about these things. With that being said, the philosophies of the two different parties are vastly different, and I've seen it because I've served in the minority, I've served in the majority, and the way they look at these programs and how to fund them is a vastly different political perspective. And as far as the Medicare, Medicaid question, Dwayne, that's a federal issue. I would be certainly willing to work with whom I'm assuming is going to be Jen Schultz going forward on making these Medicare and Medicaid questions more palatable to the public. And my opponent, Roger, brought up a good point. We're all across the district, we're talking about ambulance services, and they're in a problem. We're having a problem funding our ambulance services. I'm working with one of my colleagues down there, John Hewitt, and he's working on coming up with a potential funding formula similar to, based off of maybe our school funding, not quite as much because it's not quite as in-depth as school funding, but a same type formula that'll work across the state. Because I don't think forming taxing districts are the answer. I think that we need to have a uniform way of paying our ambulances all across the state that takes out the talk of having the big companies that are making decent money down in the bigger cities having control of how these operations work and not getting the good payback to our smaller ambulances across the district.
Just to repeat the question for those listening, this was about Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, some of the federal programs that are support those in need and those that are on fixed income. And I absolutely do support those programs. You know, again, back to what makes a strong community, it's when those that need it most have what they need to get by. When our children are fed, when people have opportunities to education, when seniors are not living in poverty because a spouse passed away that was the breadwinner. These are things that make America a great place and the best country in the world. But again, to the others at the table's point, these are federal programs. And I think this is what differentiates my opponent and I. I have experience working in the U.S. Senate. I have worked on federal policy. I have drafted amendments at the federal level. I have formed relationships with Senator Klobuchar and Senator Tina Smith. These are things that matter. Certainly, state legislators' jobs are to pass state legislation, but let's not kid ourselves that they're also an advocate for their region at the federal, state, and local level. And so we need somebody that can step into these shoes immediately, be able to go to DC and fight for the things that we need most. And I think that I bring that experience. I also worked at the Department of Agriculture, which administers one of these very programs. And so I'm very familiar with how those things work. With regards to the rural ambulance, I agree with both Rob and Roger. We have a huge deficit when it comes to our rural ambulance and our EMS services. This is, again, another place where we can be advocates at the federal level and at the state level to ensure that we're getting our fair share to the Northland for these things. I can't tell you at the doors how many people have talked to me about prescription drugs and rural ambulance and the fear that people have when minutes and seconds could matter if a spouse has a heart attack, an ambulance not being able to get to them or being underfunded. The volunteer firefighter and ambulance services that we have in many of our communities are critically understaffed, much like the rest of our workforce. These are needs that we need to address, and it goes to staying out of the extremes, staying out of the distractions, and focusing again on the real issues that matter. And I think you can trust that I will be somebody that will stay focused on those things and be effective.
And we'll stay right there. With everything going on now with schools and open enrollments and attendance and homeschool and everything else, what is your position on private school vouchers, including tuition tax credits and education savings accounts?
Yeah, I think we should be really proud of the public school programs that we have here in the Northland. That was one of the reasons why my wife and I chose to resettle here in Minnesota, because Minnesota has the Minnesota Miracle. For those of you that are unfamiliar, in the 1970s, Minnesota made a state decision to fund education at some of the highest levels that we've seen in the country. And if you look at the data nationally, even with some of the setbacks that we've faced with COVID, Minnesota continues to be a top-tier education state. And that is, once again, another reason why I am just so proud to be a Minnesotan and to be running for this state Senate race. So I would fully look towards funding public education, supporting our teachers. We have a huge gap when it comes to special education and our counseling services. We all know that we're facing a mental health crisis in this country. We're facing an opioid crisis in this country. We cannot let our children fall behind when it comes to those issues. So funding that gap that we have in special education and counseling is another area that we need to be focused on. I'm extremely disappointed that the legislature this last session had to deal with Senate Majority Leader Jeremy Miller, Speaker Hortman, and Governor Walz to not only provide historic tax relief and eliminate the tax on Social Security income, but they were going to fund $1 billion to get us back to that promise of a Minnesota miracle in Minnesota. And unfortunately, the Senate walked away from that deal. The Senate Republican majority walked away from that deal because they didn't want to hand a win to Governor Walz. And I think that is extremely disappointing, because what it means is it just sets our kids back further. And that's just not the types of distractions and gridlock that we need to have in our legislature. And I'll be the opposite. I'll work with both sides to get the job done on education.
I fully support our public education system and our instructors in the education system. I agree with Grant on several of the comments he made, but I want to reiterate that we need to put the funding into school counseling to make sure that our children are getting the needs addressed that they have. Minnesota ranks somewhere around 47. I think Missouri ranks above us in the amount of money that they're putting into counseling and mental health services in the state, and that's a crying shame. Although my spouse is employed by a private school, I do not support private school vouchers. I believe that will take away from the charter and the charge of what our education system is about. If somebody wants to send their child to a private school or a charter school, that is completely their option. But I do not believe the taxpayers of Minnesota should be providing the funding to make those private schools run.
I guess this is where we start to veer a little bit. I think our public schools have done a good job up till now. The numbers that we're seeing, the test scores, they're so low, and we can blame it on the pandemic, and we can blame it on a lot of things. But I think what's happening is, I think the legislature, y'all put $500 million 2 years ago into education, and we still haven't gotten any test scores. If test scores are the way you judge where education should be, but just seeing the workforce as they come out, as they come into community colleges or go to colleges, I think there's a better way of educating our kids, and I think there's some states out there that do a better job. And rather than say, hey, what a great system we have, and not look at a new way, I think we're doing a disservice to the kids, and I think we're doing a disservice to the taxpayers. I'm not in favor. If you want to play the game the way the federal government is with oil right now, by making gas so high that makes you forces you to buy an electric car, that kind of mentality. I don't want to do that with the education system, but I want the education system to know that it's not just show up and we give you money. There has to be a fundamental sea change in the way we deliver education. I am not happy personally with what I see. Again, that's my voice, personal voice. I represent everybody else, but I'm going to go down there with a mindset that, is there a better way? Can we work together? And the inner cities are, to me, the education in the inner cities, they found charter schools are the best or better, and that should be that way. It should be that way. Maybe a charter school out here, and not all the money. In Ely, we have a lot of homeschoolers. This year, they finally got some of those homeschoolers back to the school. But when you have graduating classes of 36, and you have 54 homeschoolers, they're mixed up throughout the grades, it's kind of like, what's going on? Why aren't they using our public education? I don't think it's a perfect system. I think it really needs to be looked at, and I'm not saying we should take all the money away from public schools, but I think the public schools need to look at and really take a hard look at themselves and say, how can we be better? Because I don't think they're right where they need to be.
Rob, you wanted to add something?
Well, I do. Thanks, Dwayne. And since I only took about a minute and a half, I got a little time left. Our $500 million education budget got us back to where we were at before Governor Pawlenty unallotted the schools. And it took several years, 2 administrations after Governor Pawlenty, to start getting the school districts back to where they were as far as the funding cycle goes. Last year, we recommended record funding, I'll admit it, in the education bill, and it would have put us back on the path to the Minnesota Miracle again. So unfortunately, the Senate Republicans walked away from the deal, as Grant talked about, but that's something we'll take care of in the next legislative session.
All right, Rob, we'll keep it with you, and we're going to do a follow-up regarding schools, and that is that the University of Minnesota announced this morning that they're going to be asking for a record budget increase at the next legislative session. How do we sell that to the taxpayer?
I don't know. It's going to be a tough one. The University of Minnesota has been asking for record increases off and on for a long time, as well as asking for record tuition increases. Part of it is the cost of doing business nowadays in this economy. I started my college career out here at Rainy River Community College. I think my first quarter, the credits were $38 a piece, if I remember, something like that. They're under $50 a piece anyway. I don't know if anybody from the college is here now, but I suspect that they're well over $200 a piece now, is my guess, or around that point. How we're going to rein in the cost of higher ed, I don't know the answer to that. And there's a lot of folks in the legislature looking at it. We've talked about making sure our Board of Regents are the right people to look at these type of budgets and come up with the right type of budget that we have. But take a look at what we pay for the extracurriculars, and that's I'm as big a Gopher fan as anybody. But does PJ Fleck need to make that kind of a salary? I'm not sure. But it's what the alumni and what others want to be able to pay for it. And so I think that's the kind of things that we need to start taking a look at and see if we really want to have higher ed or if we really want to provide entertainment. And that's what the folks in the state of Minnesota are going to have to decide.
Thanks, Rob. Let's pass that over to Roger.
Thank you. When I started college in 1980 at North Dakota State, it was $214 a quarter. I was a land-grant university, 3 quarters, $214. It was $642 for the year for tuition. When I graduated in 1985, I was extended 1 year. I had so much fun at college. I graduated, it was $1,395. It more than doubled in 5 years. Right now, Rob, I think it's like $200 some a credit for some of these colleges. So where is it all going? I mean, what is it? Where are we going? I think as a legislature, and when they come to the record budget, we got to look at, what about tech schools? Look at this school. You know, this school at Ely, the whole system, it used to be independent, and they're getting squeezed. The legislature is squeezing these small community colleges and trying to make them, and who knows what's going to happen in the future, because I think if you do a cost analysis, we aren't up there. I mean, we're subsidized quite a bit, and rightfully so for education. But when you go to the University of Minnesota, and Rob is correct, what are we paying for? I mean, does the academic department make money for itself? Does it bring in more money? North Dakota State, the Bison, they bring in piles of money to the university. It's incredible. And then the research grants. So for me to say that this budget is enormous, I don't really know enough about it, but I know how to look at that budget, and I know how to talk to the regents. David McMillan just retired. He used to be our regent in this area. He was in Ely. When I was taking pictures for the campaign, he was over at the mine shaft, and it was interesting talking to him about why he's retiring. And I don't think education is going to be easy anymore. I don't think it's an easy sell. I don't think you're going to come to the legislature and say, we need money for the kids. What are you doing with the money you have? And I think that's a fair question to ask the people putting on the education, whether it's in public school or the university budget.
Grant?
Yeah, I think a request is exactly that. It's a request. When they're out there advocating for themselves, it makes sense that they would look for the resources that make them able to do the best job that they think they can do. But it's our job as legislators, if I'm elected, to evaluate those requests, to look in to what it is that they're requesting and what they hope to do, and maybe look at some metrics that evaluate what's being done. We know that the University of Minnesota is one of the top research universities in the country. They've done, miraculous heart research. They've done agriculture research on Honeycrisp apples and all the things that we love in those regards. So we know that great work is happening there. But I think it's really important that we look into those funding and make sure that we're taking a balanced approach. Everybody makes requests. Municipalities make requests for millions of dollars. Republicans and right-wing politicians ask for tax cuts for the top 1%. There's a lot of things that are hard to swallow when it comes to the request before the legislature, and it's our job to take those requests and balance out what makes the most sense to make our state a well-run and strong community like I've talked about. I think education is really important. One idea that I would have, because I've done higher education fundraising on the philanthropy side, is why don't we provide some matching dollars from the state surplus and charge our foundations and our higher education institutions to go out and find private donors to match those donations. They could create a higher endowment, pay out more scholarships, help create more affordability. If they have a capital project request for a new business school, I'm just making that up, but if they do, why don't we have them create some matching private dollars if they're going to make the request? That way we know that they have buy-in, but we're still providing them some critical funding to make sure that the projects can happen. I think that's a really good way to ensure that we're balancing what the real needs are versus getting some private dollars and maximizing our support.
All right, Grant, let's keep it with you. Do you believe that refugee settlement puts the United States at risk in terms of national security? Why or why not?
So the question was, do I think that refugee resettlement puts America at risk? I think this is not a black and white answer. America needs to make sure that we are providing a refugee for immigrants that are being chased out of their country, that are seeking refuge from civil war or whatever it might be. We have always been a country that is welcoming, and that is part of what makes America so strong. Immigrants made this country. I know my grandparents, and I'm sure nearly all of us, unless folks have Native American heritage, came from somewhere. But that said, every country needs rules, every country needs laws, every country needs to ensure that we are balancing the needs of our current residents with perhaps future immigrants. And so we need to make sure that we're creating strong visa programs, that we're perhaps recruiting those that are that would bring a skill set or perhaps a PhD in some sort of research that could come to the University of Minnesota. Those are the types of smart immigration policy that we can have here in the United States. And it's something that, for instance, Canada does a really great job at, a very comparable country here in North America. They get, immigrants from Asia and all over that bring a lot of opportunities to their country. But we have to look at all rungs of the ladder. And again, I just think that America is stronger when we make sure that folks are looked out for and that we bring diversity. And so, I think that it's a nuanced answer. I would want to look into it and make sure that we're doing it right.
Rob?
Refugees, by definition, would be legal immigrants because we wouldn't let illegal refugees in. So legal immigration is something this country needs. The Iron Range, just to the south of us, is developed on legal immigrants. They used to put people in the in the elevator going down the mine shaft, 17 different people, 17 different languages, so they couldn't talk to each other and organize a union and do the kind of things that should be done to make working folks' lives better. We still figured out how to do it. Those refugees or immigrants are pretty smart. So it makes our country stronger when we have legal immigration. And Grant hit the nail right on the head. We've got legal immigrants all over the world that come to this country. I work with some of them down at the legislature. The Hmong community is absolutely amazing what they do and how they create businesses and sustain their abilities. The Somali community is the same way. They are nothing to be frightened of, and they're good, hardworking Americans that make our communities vibrant. So the refugee program in the United States works very well, and I'm proud of it.
I agree. Rob hit the nail on the head. The refugee is a legal immigration. Why wouldn't you support legal immigration? That's who we are. It's how my grandparents came here from Yugoslavia, from Slovenia. Well, what I would like to see more of is the J1 program that we used to have. I sit on St. Louis County Planning, and when Kaptogama resorts were having, because there's no kids to work anymore, there just aren't any kids to do dock work and that, and they were coming in and asking for variances to build bunkhouses onto their commercial businesses, which is not allowed. You know, you don't want people living in a commercial business. But and I knew what the individual wanted. I'm like, you need to put your people somewhere because you got J1s. And he didn't tell us that in the hearing. And then I finally got it out of him, and he goes, yeah. I'm like, why didn't you say that in the beginning? Of course we're going to help you. I mean, my gosh, you need help because there's no one to work. And you can't, these business owners just work because they love what they do. So Ely has a ton of them. We have a lot of J1 visa people working in Ely. The federal government suspended it this year, because of COVID, but we have people in our community that bought resorts and shut the resort down and opened all the cabins up for J1 immigrants to stay in, because part of the deal is who you work for has to supply the housing. So it all works. It's like we have this community working together to bring these people in, these foreign workers who bring culture that's amazing. I mean, I think it's awesome that these people come to us, and you know, maybe they're going to say, hey, you know what, I like America enough, I'm going to go through the legal process to come and work here. That to me is win, win, win. Everybody wins here. So yeah, that's really not much of a question, but thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll keep it with you. Do you believe that sincerely held religious or moral beliefs should dictate which customers a business can serve?
You know, in my first blush, no, because I don't. I think you work with people and serve people. You know, if I could use an example, and I think it's a stupid example. So if a Muslim shows up in a Catholic and a Catholic says, I don't want to serve them, really? I mean, it's 2022. Can't we work with each other? So no, I think we need to, if there are laws that stop that or preclude that, we need to fix it.
No, and if a person does that, a business like that in Cushing County or International Falls or Ely or Grand Marais, they won't be in business long. Not in these communities. So absolutely not. There are no laws. That's a personal choice. And if a business person is so short-sighted that they want to deny a customer because of religious or personal affiliation, I just think that's wrong.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. My final question then would be something that I've asked Rob many times, and that is, as you continue on in your political ambitions and get on to whether you're at a House or a Senate or whatever committees you might be on, how do we get back to the point where we're doing politics between the aisles, not doing something because my side says we can do it or the other side says we can't do it? How do we get back into bipartisan politics? Yep.
Yeah, I think this has been one of my biggest, concerns jumping into this race. We had an independent senator who was able to work across the aisle, and I have the experience working, again, kind of to reiterate what I've said before, for a U.S. senator who was the number 50 most moderate senator, who was courted by the Trump administration as a Democrat to possibly work as a Secretary of Agriculture. And so I know what it's like to be at that table talking about federal policy that's working across the aisle. The other beautiful thing about being more independent-minded in a legislature full of politicalization is that you have a lot of leverage. And so I think it's really important that when the Northland is making their decision in these elections, that they're considering who is the senator or the representative that's going to actually be able to make deals and work with both sides. Because the last thing that we want is a senator that's going to be one-sided. A senator that's going to get in the back of their party's line and wait for directions. A senator who's not going to know what to do when they actually become a legislature. And so my thing that I am bringing to the table is that experience and that independent-minded value that I think we need for the Northland to sort of continue what Tom Bach started. And I think you'll find that I can be really effective for us in that way.
Go to Roger.
Again, I was elected mayor 4 times by Democrats and Republicans. And there's a lot of times when we have issues come before the city council that they're not Republican or Democrat, but they go against each of the way we perceive it. So a vote happens. If I'm on the losing side of a vote, I'm the mayor, I still have to do what the body wants. I put away my differences and I work to get that done. I do that in St. Louis County in the Planning Commission. Same thing. Once it's passed, that's what we do. We did a thing in St. Louis County, a short-term rental. I was the only person to vote against it because I don't believe in it. And I still vote with it every time now because we as a body said we want it. So I understand where you're coming from. I believe, and these are numbers that I'm not solid on, but I think there's 60 openings between redistricting and retirements in the House. And there is 134. So we're not that far from a whole half of a legislature coming in. What I've been campaigning on, telling people is that, again, I'm not going to be lockstep with my party. I want to do what's best for the constituents of the district. I represent the district. I don't represent me. I'm a vessel for you all, what you need. Sometimes my views out, how do I say it? If I'm with the Republican Party on some of these issues, yeah, it's difficult for me to go way out on the left, and it's hard, and I can't vote that way. But as a rule, what I'm going to try to do, and what I do now currently as a mayor, is I try to get all the information I can and take this partisanship. On Monday, every Monday, we have a meeting with the HRCC, House Republican Campaign Committee, and all the candidates call in together. And we talk to each other via Zoom. And I ask the question, how many folks here, what's your top door knock issue? And mine by far and away has been, can you guys just work together? Can you please work together? And I'm like, yes, that is my goal. So when I brought it up at the meeting, when the Republicans win the House, Kurt Doubt will be the speaker more than likely. And Kurt was speaking and said, when we take the House this time, we have to, and it was very specific, we have to work across the aisle. We cannot work on the way it's running now. Nobody wants it that way. I don't want it that way. I will work to make sure we don't do that because we're not getting anywhere.
Roger's talking to the same people on the doors I am, it sounds like. I tell people when they ask that question, I say, the trouble with the political system in it started out in the United States or Washington, D.C., and has bled down into the states, is the nuts on the right and the nuts on the left are trying to control the rhetoric. I'm a moderate. I was, I think my third year down there, fourth year down there, I was voted either third, fourth, or fifth most conservative Democrat in the caucus. And I could tell you who the other first, second, third, fourth, or fifth of them were, because we're part of what the Speaker Hortman, who, by the way, has done a tremendous job in navigating this legislature, she called us her six-pack. And the rest of the caucus would get kind of mad at that, because when we talked about legislation, the six-pack is who would have the influence on what kind of legislation was going to come out and what the final product was. Because she knew that if us six left, whatever they tried to put forward would not happen. That's what's called influence, and that's what's called having the leverage to be able to get things done. And by sticking true to my moderate roots, I have earned from my colleagues on the other side the right to have them come over and talk to me and say, let's work together on this. And that doesn't happen too much anymore in politics, because we all rely on the rhetoric. And part of it is these things we're all carrying in our pocket. We see it every 30 seconds, something pops up, and oh boy, do I believe that one this time, and all that kind of stuff. That's what's driving what's going on in politics today. So in my 7 years down there, I've cultivated and cultured many good friends on the Republican side of the aisle, both lobbyists, of that dirty, rotten word, but they're part of the process down there, and my colleagues. So when I get down there, regardless of whether I'm in the majority or in the minority, when I win this race, I will be able to work with whoever's in there, because I will either be chair of a very powerful committee because of my seniority, or I will be lead on a very powerful committee and be able to talk about what needs to be done in northern Minnesota and work with the people across the aisle and the other folks that look and talk like we do in northern Minnesota to get things done.
Thank you. Now we'll see if we can't get Mike to do a little bit of work here. And if anybody in the audience has any questions, please raise your hand, and Mike will bring you the mic.
Okay, I didn't know that was going to happen. I just gave your name and the question.
My name is Martha Emmaheiser. I'm a retired school teacher. My husband is a school administrator, past, and I'm in my 80s. And I've seen a lot of changes in the culture of the schools. I've been a public school teacher, and I've also been a private school teacher. I'm an elementary school teacher. And the state of Minnesota, it's not just about who's funding education, it's what are we funding? Are we funding things that build us up as patriots and as proud Americans? And I have seen some states embrace a theory known as critical race theory. Mr. Ecklund, do you know what critical race theory is?
My understanding, critical race theory is a theory that's taught in college, generally in law school, and it's just simply that, a theory. It is not in our public education system.
Well, it's said that it isn't in our public education. I mean, it's always denied, but it comes under many different headings. And basically, a shortcut on that philosophy is critical race theory means basically that white people, and you've heard about white privilege a lot, white people have exercised inappropriate force to make people of color subservient. So therefore, they should be chastised. In other words, white people should be chastised because they have not been fair with the people that are black. That's critical race theory, basically. And it is more or less brings out the fact that our founding fathers were slavers, and therefore they're not to be respected and admired as people who had the right idea about what our country meant. And of course, I know that our country was not founded on racism. That is not part of American history. It is part of a theory that has gone forth. But anyway, I know that it is not admitted. And we talked about authenticity. The parents recently have come to school board. I went to a school board meeting, and they were protesting mandates on vaccines and mandates on masking with our children. And so when the parents came to the school board, police were called. And you've heard parents called a domestic terrorist because they're saying, we don't like these policies and we want a say. And we're not getting a say. And I think that's what we're seeing in America. We're seeing a divide between people who do not want to hear anything other than what they want to stay and mandate. And they mandated masks, not scientifically. They mandated masks because it came from on high. And the teachers' unions and everything stood by that. Therefore, 200 students left this district and went to other districts because they didn't want to have to follow a mask mandate. Masks don't work, and neither does the vaccine. If the vaccine worked, you wouldn't get it again. So we do have some real bones to pick about certain things, and I think we should be listened to. And also, you up there represent the Walz administration. And the crime in cities is a big thing with Americans. We have been wonderfully safe here in International Falls. This is a wonderful place. I've never seen a place that is just perfect as a community. But see, I haven't been here very long either. But I really do love it here. I'm from Texas. Anyway, the fact that the administration, the Walz administration, defunded the police, or at least they let it happen. They let it happen. They let Lake Street burn. They stood down while the city was burned. And sometimes in the media they would say they were mostly peaceful. These were terrible riots that went forth in the city.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Dave.
You got to talk, otherwise no one can hear.
I'd just like to know why one candidate was in a car accident. Did she say she wasn't going to come or what? Does anybody know why she isn't here?
Personal reason? Okay. Questions? Any questions? Now's the time.
With the CDC today approving the mandatory COVID vaccine for children's potentially school admissions and whatnot, what would you guys do if that were to be, if you were to face that? How would you, if it were to become a Minnesota thing for all of the public school districts, would they force kids to get the vaccine as part of their immunization schedule?
I'll go first on that. I think our school immunization requirements are good as they are right now. It is my understanding with the CDC doing this that there will be a long trial and I don't know if you call it a trial period, a research period, whatever, as far as making it actual part of a vaccine schedule like measles, mumps, the rest of the things are. I don't know what all the shots were that I got when I was a kid. Shoot, when I was in the Marines, Roger can remember this when he was in the Army. We just lined up and they gave us about 17 of them. I don't know what they were. So anyway, but as far as making it part of the school regimen, I know it's a long vetted process before that would actually make that as part of the thing, part of it. And I think this is just a CDC recommendation at the time, to my understanding.
Yeah, I would agree with Rob, and I know that even with some of those requirements, there are obviously exceptions that are made under certain circumstances for children or religious or whatever it might be. But America, much like most first world countries, have had immunization policies in place because we know that that's how these vaccines work. We know that that making sure that young people are immunized is a key part of addressing things like polio. There's a reason why people don't have polio anymore in America, because we're a country that has made sure that folks have that vaccine. But certainly, I don't think there's going to be a unequivocal requirement of our kids to get something that a parent doesn't want, and that exceptions would be allowed. Let's certainly hope that we can get to a point where those research trials are done, and where we get to the point where we're in a place where we can try to mitigate COVID and get most of the population vaccinated.
Thank you. No, I don't believe the state should be involved in forcing kids to get vaccines. I think if the CDC wants to have that done, then go ask a city or a school board. They're the ones that have to deal with it. But what I've seen happen, and did you say trials, or someone said something about trials? How long it's going to take. Everything happened way too fast. And if we learned anything from this, we have to learn that if we believe something's coming up, we have to prepare ourselves better. In my opinion, this pandemic should have opened the eyes of the emergency people to learn how to deal with this, instead of everyone looking to one person for the answer, to find other areas to get these answers. The CDC, in all their infinite wisdom, their job is to do one thing, and that's it. And then we interpret from that. So the question was, mandatory COVID tests or vaccine for the kids. No, I wouldn't support that. Mandatory, no.
Any other questions?
Can I ask one? Sure. Okay. I've been in radio now for 5 years, so I've kind of been through a few of these elections, and it seems to me that this year more than any, there's so much more negative ads, campaigns, whether it's TV, radio, newspaper. Not saying how I feel about it, but what do you guys feel about the negative, campaigns?
So I'll go the long way. The short way is easy. It's dumb. That's the fast one. The long way is, I was door knocking in Sedan, and this couple was sitting on their driveway, and they had their outdoor fire pit on their driveway, and they were relaxing, and I was like, man, you guys dialed in. You got to, that's awesome. And I started talking with him, and he turns out he's a mail carrier in the city of Virginia. And we started talking about all this. I got to be nice, and all this crap that's going on. And he goes, I can hardly wait till this is over. He goes, I am so sick of it. And, when we're door knocking, I know everyone is just tired of it. I don't get most of this stuff at my house. So when I'm in the post office, I rifle through the box that everyone throws stuff away, and I start reading, and I'm just like, I'm with them. Just leave it in the garbage, because it doesn't mean anything. And I don't know why both parties are doing this. I talk to my people. I'm like, I did one mailer for myself. I paid for one mailer, 12,800 pieces, to say how great I am and how nice I am. And it cost me $7,600. And I'm sitting there thinking, looking at all this crap that comes every day, and I just shake my head, and I'm thinking, that money can be put in such better use somewhere. And I don't know where, but I mean, when we first started this game, we were told, raise $40,000 for mailers. No way. Maybe I'm a cheapskate, but there's no way I'm going to spend that much money to mail, because there's so much negative mailing that you try to mail a positive piece, people just throw it away because they're tired of looking at it. So I'm frustrated with it because, coming up here, they say Rob voted for a $15,000 pay raise. I go, how? Where is that? Show me that. Because I don't know. I see this stuff. I don't say that. Everyone else says it. So I'm like, well, if it would have been this and that would have been, it would have added up to this much. And I'm like, so it's really not like a $15,000 pay raise. No, it's not that way. And I'm like, we got to, and both sides are guilty of it. I just wish there'd be a better way to get our message out safer. And as much as I would like to say it shouldn't happen, we shouldn't have that. What is it? Independent expenditures. If we say that shouldn't happen, but that's free speech. That's free speech, and I don't want to stop it, but there's got to be to something because I'm sick of it, and I'm a candidate, and that's not just of me. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of looking at it about Rob and everybody, all of us. Yeah, I'm frustrated, obviously.
Negative sells. That's why the parties are doing it. It's terrible. It's awful, but that's what they do. I haven't seen Roger's mailer. If he sent it to 12,600 people, I assume I was on the list. So maybe it came and I didn't see it. But I remember back when I worked relief staff for the steelworkers in 2008. The only thing I remember out of all the training that they gave me was that the average time a piece of literature goes from the mailbox to the garbage is 11 seconds. So that might be a good thing on all this negative stuff that's coming out. But I don't like it. We see it every day. And I made a promise to my spouse that this campaign run by me would be nothing but positive, because if I can't win on what I've done as a legislator for the last 7 years, I don't need to be there anyway. So I'm not slamming Roger personally. None of the stuff that I put out does, but the parties do, and Minnesota's for Prosperities, Minnesotans for this, Minnesota's for whatever the Minnesotans are for, are the ones that are putting a lot of this crap out. And I wish it would end. And I'd go on public record here that we pick out a number, I don't know what it is, but I'll just pull it out of the air, $50,000 given to each candidate by the state of Minnesota from some election commission that we create, and that's the money you can spend, and that's how you run your campaign. Whether it's $50,000, $20,000, whatever the number is, and we all spend the same thing and keep the IEs out of it, and let's talk about who's the right person for the job for what they propose to do.
Rob, I wanted $67,000 because that's what we get to spend, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. Once you get picked by your party, the legislature gives you $67,000 must be spent in the state, preferably in your district. Has to be. You can't buy a California guy, some slick guy that's going to do everything for you. I think we do that. That's an investment in our state. It's an investment back over again. So let's write the bill.
Yeah, if you believed all the negative ads, you would think that a city councilor like me in Hermantown is responsible for, the national crime wave, that I'm responsible for the global inflation that is occurring in our country. You would think that I am responsible for the Feed Our Future controversy, even though I'm not in political office at the state level. So there's a lot of nonsense out there that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think to Rob and Roger's point, the only way this works is if voters fall for it. So my message to you all is if you get even an ounce of a negative mailer or digital ad or even a TV ad, turn it off. Look at what the candidates are saying personally. Watch them in these types of forums and debates, which is why I look forward to these opportunities, and thank you for hosting it. Look at their website, at their actual issues, because there are just straight lies out there. And it's really, really unfortunate. To give you some context to what Roger was saying, in the Senate district, let's say a candidate spends $50,000. There are Senate legislative districts in Minnesota where over $1 million is being spent on targeted races. So if I can spend $60,000 or whatever it might be, and outside groups are sending in mailers and TV ads over $1 million, whose voice is getting heard? Certainly not the candidates who are the very ones running for office to represent the people. And so it's really, really important that we listen to the actual candidates. And I think you all obviously get that because you're here at a forum listening to us. And I just so appreciate that because not a lot of folks do. But I think we're all in agreement here that something needs to be done. I am a fervent advocate for campaign finance reform. I think we need to limit, i.e., independent expenditure into campaigns because if anything, it's just clouding the argument and making it really difficult for folks to feel engaged in the civic and political process, and that's a shame.
We got one more. Your name?
Miriam Birchall. Roger, do you mean that if a doctor has it would be required to perform an abortion if it is against his sincerely held religious beliefs, and an apartment owner would be required to accept a homosexual couple in their apartment? This doesn't sound like liberty.
I'm confused. No, I think that if they deny those people those things, is that what you mean? I guess I'm not understanding what your question is to me.
Do you think that a doctor should be required to perform an abortion?
Oh.
Do you think that apartment owners should be required to accept a homosexual couple?
I think there are exceptions for everything. There's exceptions. I think that if a doctor takes the Hippocratic Oath and says that I'm going to help people, and if an abortion is something that helps that person, and if they fundamentally say, I can't do that, then they should find someone that can. I think it's their duty to do that, whether they want to or not. They have to be part of that process. They were in that process. As much as heinous as it is, or it feel that way, those are, to me, that is the way it should be. The landlord for not taking the homosexuals as because of that, I believe that's illegal. It's they can't do that, you know. And once again, I try not to judge people. That's not my. I accept people for who they are and what they are. I personally don't judge people. So if this landlord says, I don't want to, you're gay, I don't want to take you. You know, I think the law speaks for itself.
You want an answer from all of us on that? Or, not really? Okay. You know what I think? Well, you might be surprised. I think it's completely wrong. A person like a legislator does not belong in a person's bedroom or in their doctor's office. And I'll leave it at that.
Anybody else? Anybody else? One more? I was just over there.
Mike's getting his exercise tonight. That's good for him.
So what's this year?
My name's Michelle. I've only been in Minnesota for about a year, a little over a year, so this is my first election cycle here. My question is for Grant, and with Andrea not being here, she can't address this, but you spoke fairly highly of your predecessor, and my understanding is that he has endorsed your opponent. So what would you say to that, or what is your difference if he was such a great senator? What difference are you bringing to the office?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that Tom Bach was the type of senator that was able to sort of be above the fray and deliver for our region. There's no doubting, no matter how you feel politically about him, there's no denying the fact that he was able to deliver more money to our district than any other senator for any other district in our state. And so to me, that's an admirable trait. He is no nonsense. He doesn't really get involved in a lot of the side issues. He's very focused on economics. He's very focused on tax issues. He's very focused on bonding. And so when you take out the areas where him and I maybe disagree, which there are, I'm sure, very many of them, at the end of the day, I hope that my experience at the federal level in the U.S. Senate, at the Department of Agriculture, at the local level in City Council, and I didn't touch on this, but I run a healthcare foundation where I raise money for patients and families that can't afford the care they need, so I have healthcare experience as well. I bring the breadth of experience to be able to step into those shoes and be just as effective as a senator on day one, and I would argue that my opponent does not. And it's nothing against her as a person. I just think that when this seat opened up, I got a lot of calls from a lot of people saying, holy cow, we are losing out on a major power player in the Northland, and the sad news that Senator Tomassoni passed away from ALS. We have a huge gap for our region, and we need somebody that can do this job. And I just, when you run, you have to believe in yourself, right? And I believe in myself, and I believe I'm the best person for the job.
Thank you very much. With no other questions, candidates will now have 3 minutes for their closing statement to summarize their qualifications and positions, and we'll start with you, Grant.
Well, gosh, I kind of feel like this latest question was maybe my closing because it kind of got the point across. But no, I really appreciate this opportunity for this forum. So thank you again to the radio station and the International Falls Chamber of Commerce for hosting this debate. I am a father and husband to Henry and Isla, a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old. I got involved in politics when I was really young, and so I see a lot in my kids, from my experience. And I don't come from a political family. I didn't have somebody bringing me around, getting me involved. And so I still remember the look on my mom's face when I asked her to drive me down to the Labor Temple to knock doors for Labor candidates. I think she had thought I grew a second head or something. I think back to that, what it was that inspired me to get involved. And I've realized that here in the Midwest, we go out of our way to help our friends, neighbors, but most importantly, complete strangers. And we don't just do that to make ourselves feel good inside. We do it because in Minnesota, we know that life is that much easier when we have each other's back. I got involved because I think that we in the legislature, in local government, in our civic engagement can make all of our lives easier when we look out for one another. And that's why I'm so proud. I've talked a lot about this, but our civic engagement, our volunteerism, our highest turnout in the country is something that Minnesota differentiates itself with the rest of the country. And so I'm a passionate individual. I am an experienced young person that can bring a different perspective, but still continue to do the things that we need to make sure that the Northland is getting the resources it needs and getting its fair share. And so I hope that I can earn your vote on November 8th because my slogan is we need a senator who can just deliver. Thanks so much.
Well, I want to thank everybody again that organized this event and submitted the questions or asked questions from the public. I appreciate that. One of the greatest things about living in this country is that we can have these type of forums and these type of settings and have these type of conversations without the fear of repercussions when we walk out the door. I mean, we're friends here. We may disagree on things. We may disagree passionately on things. But we can still be friendly and still be friends when things are done. I think the forum tonight has shown, just through the questions asked, that I'm the person that needs to continue serving you as your state representative down in St. Paul. I've proven through my body of work that I know how to get things done, that I know how to work across the aisle. Probably the prime example and one of the passions that I've worked on since I've been down there is I've helped secure in my 7 years in the legislature record amounts of broadband for the state of Minnesota. We're not there yet, but in the pandemic, in our school days when kids were sent home and trying to learn from home and people had to learn how to work from home, we've shown that broadband is probably one of the most essential things that we have going forward in our 21st century economics. And The last forum we were in, Roger kept track. We talked about broadband 6 or 7 times. It's the first time tonight. But it's something I'm proud of. And you know, this district was founded on timber, taconite, and tourism. Well, we got the fourth leg of that stool right now. It's technology. And that's what we're going to do to move this economy forward, is provide the technology to work in the 21st century. Last session, as chair of the Labor, Industry, Veterans, and Military Affairs Committee, I helped pass, and helped negotiate the first ever standalone veterans bill to take care of our veterans and military affairs. Never happened before in state history. I told leadership that I was going to talk about getting a veterans bill done, and I think the speaker said, okay, we'll keep Rob busy, go ahead. You know, we're working on lots of other things. And they were. And so Senator Lang and I got together and started talking. And pretty soon, in a matter of about 4 days, I think it actually drove leadership nuts because we didn't tell them what we were doing. In a matter of about 4 days, Senator Lang and I brought a document back to our respective leadership folks and said, this is what we want to do. And we passed darn near the whole thing. I missed one part, and that's because of the veteran suicide, and I guarantee that that will be part of the legislation next year, veteran suicide prevention. I firmly believe and will always defend our election system. We have the best election system in the world, and I will firmly defend and believe in that. So thank you, everybody, tonight. I ask that you vote for Rob Ecklund on or before November 8th. Have a great night.
Thank you. As far as broadband goes, like in the city of Ely, we have broadband, and we had to pay for it. The city of Ely, we took a loan out, we used our money, and we paid for our own broadband because we waited for the state, and the state didn't come. Right now, we have Midco putting fiber throughout our community. So we can get all the money we want, it just doesn't seem to get to where it needs to go. Governor Dayton had a broadband czar, and still, the money never, it's almost as if it's a broadband black hole, and I don't know why. I think we need to look at it. We need broadband. I completely agree. Taconite, timber, tourism, and technology. More and more people that we talk to in this district are moving here from Indiana, moving here from Texas, moving here from all over the country, and they're living in the hinterlands, and they have their Starlink set up, and they work out of their house. That's fantastic. We need more of those folks to move in here. I will help those folks move here. I have the experience to take over when we win, and I say we because it looks and feels as though the Republicans are going to win a majority of seats this year. And when that happens and I win, I'm sitting in the major chamber. I'm sitting in the caucus that dictates what we have. So if we need logging bills, I will carry the logging bills. If we need mining bills, I will carry the mining bills. I will bring those things forward as a freshman in a majority because I'm a freshman by name, but I've got the experience to make this work. One of the things I will make mandatory that I pass is the check and balance on the emergency powers that the governor has exercised in the last 2 years. That will never happen again. It should never happen again. It's a shame what happened, and I will pass a law and help pass a law so it doesn't. And as far as like the union and the union dollars, I've been associated with unions my whole life. My dad worked in the mine. I wouldn't work in the mine, and this is something that for me, what makes me experienced. We have an opportunity to get more businesses in northern Minnesota, and the businesses that are here now, these big corporations, they forget who works for them, and we have to remind them that the people that work for them are good, hardworking people, and they have to invest in them. And I will help those companies make the right decisions for our workers. I'm a mayor. I understand how we're going to work our next issues, and I will quit right now. Thank you. I hope you guys vote for me on or before November 8th. Thank you.
Grant, Rob, Roger, I'll have to say I have received a flyer from all three of you, and I've hanged on to it longer than 11 seconds because it takes me longer than that to walk from my mailbox to the back into the house. So, and I have nothing better to do than to read them as I'm walking back to the house. So I have seen all three of them.
One comment? I feel like I'm in the Groundhog Day. Keep looking at that clock. It's 1 o'clock, 5 after 1, 5 after 1.
All right, gentlemen, RJ Broadcasting would like to thank you for coming tonight. We would especially like to thank the candidates for being a part of the democratic process by running for office and for being willing to serve the communities. You can find more information about the candidates and about voting at mnvotes.org. And again, thank you for coming, and remember to vote on November 8th.